That was Signal the Sirens by In McCall Drive here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Coming up next is Bad Company by ASAP Rocky featuring Block Boy JB here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Please enjoy and stay tuned. Currently, it is 88 degrees here on the campus of Florissant Valley Community College. I'm Jell with your noon news update. An investigation is underway after a gun was found by a child at a Glen Carbon daycare facility. The president of Early Explorations 2 says the firearm was discovered yesterday in a bag brought to the center by a parent. The child brought the gun to a teacher who immediately called the police. No injuries were reported. The Schnucks grocery chain is planning to open a new store in Maplewood next month. The new location will open in August inside the old Shop and Save on Manchester Road. About 100 employees will be hired to staff the store. And a St. Louis diner is damaged after it caught fire over the weekend. The blaze broke out Saturday at Billy's Fine Foods on South Broadway. The cause of the fire hasn't been released. There is no word of any injuries. As for the weather, today it is partly cloudy, high of 91, low of 76. Tomorrow it is partly cloudy, high of 95, low of 78. Thursday, still partly cloudy, high of 95, low of 75. Friday, we've got thunderstorms in the morning with a high of 87, low of 63. And Saturday, it will be sunny with a high of 85, low of 63. It is also worth mentioning that today, tomorrow, and the day after, there's a 20% chance of precipitation. And that about wraps up our news and weather. Currently, it is 88 degrees here at KCFV. I'm Jell, and this has been your noon news update. But please stay tuned, because after a short break, we will be back with GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noonish to 3 p.m. So please stay tuned, enjoy, but until then, here is The Hero of Canton by the Browncoats, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Yes. That was Toe the Line by Mesoterra, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noonish to 3 p.m. We like to kick the show off with what new games are coming out this week, and what's coming out next week, and what anime are in theaters. We'd like to. Unfortunately, there we go. I just had to threaten it. I love when that happens. Maybe we can. Hold on. See, the computers are loading a little slow today. All I had was the PS4 and the Xbox One's up. I couldn't get anything else to pop up, and then just as I was saying that, they're like, oh yeah, sure, here's the rest of your games. All right, so we can get on with this. I love how that works. So, we can do this. I was just popping on to apologize that I didn't have the lists up yet, but no, here's the list. Okay, so, let's get started. PlayStation 4 this week gets Jurassic World Evolution, Red Faction Guerrilla, Remastered, Runbow, Observer, and, yeah, well, that's it for this week. Xbox One this week gets Jurassic World Evolution, Red Faction Guerrilla Remastered, Gnome's Garden 3, The Thief of Castles, What the Box? Lego Marvel Superheroes 2, Marvel's Ant-Man and the Wasp, Sword Art Online, Fatal Bullet, Betrayal of Comrades, which I think that came out like 2 months ago on PS4. Warhammer 40k Inquisitor Martyr Imperium Edition, and As Divine Hearts, which I know that's an Kemco mobile RPG that's been ported to a lot of things, and Wheel Spin Frenzy. So hey, for once the Xbox One has more games than the PS4. That's nice. It's good that happened. The Switch, though. Switch has Spirit Sphere DX, Runbow, Nekopara Volume 1, Arcade Archives, Neo Geo, Samurai Showdown 5, Awkward, Disease, Hidden Object, Johnny Turbo's Arcade, Two Crude Dudes, Miles and Kilo, Mushroom Wars 2, Pocket Rumble, Squid's Odyssey, Super Rock Blasters, The Journey Down, Chapter 3, Ultra Space Battle Brawl, Yuso, The Wardrobe, and Rento Fortune. And the Vita, nothing this week, but it's got stuff next week. 3DS, hey, we got the Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds new Nintendo 2DS XL Hylian Shield Edition. So, 2DS XL shaped like a Hylian Shield. Cool. Penguin Hop and Zeus Quest Remastered. Oh, that's a word. Anagenesis of Gaia. It's a lot of N's. But okay, Zeus Quest Remastered, Anagenesis of Gaia. Let's see. Coming up next week, though, the PS4 is getting 20XX, Black Sea Odyssey, Defiance 2050, which, if you recall, Spontaneous Sidekick Sully was talking a lot about that. Hotel Transylvania 3, Monsters Overboard, Insane Robots, MXGP Pro, Shining Resonance Refrain, The Spectrum Retreat, and Earthfall, Owlboy Limited Edition, and Chicken Assassin Reloaded. Xbox One is getting Defiance 2050, Hotel Transylvania 3, Monsters Overboard, MXGP Pro, Shining Resonance Refrain. Hey, it's got an Xbox One release. That's nice. 20XX, Ghost 1.0, Warhammer, Vermintide 2, Earthfall, Gekido, Kintaro's Revenge, which that's a port of the GBA game, now with 2-player support, Insane Robots, and The Spectrum Retreat. Nintendo Switch next week is scheduled to get Another World, Pato Box, 20XX, Bomber Crew, Hotel Transylvania 3, Monsters Overboard, Hunting Simulator, Muddle Dash, Never Out, Shining Resonance Refrain. I forgot it was getting a Switch release. The Lion Song, Philip Hicks, Phil's Epic Adventure, Ghost 1.0, Holy Potatoes, a weapon shop? And Super Volley Blast, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and Octopath Traveler. Hey, pretty nice week for RPGs on the Switch. Vita is getting Muv-Luv and Muv-Luv Alternative. Muv-Luv being a pretty typical visual novel dating sim type thing, and Muv-Luv Alternative being a soul-crushingly depressing alternate universe giant robot take on the series where everyone dies. I have heard very good things about Muv-Luv Alternative, actually, as silly as that sounds, but I have heard it is absolutely soul-crushingly depressing and you will cry. And the 3DS is getting Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. So, that wraps up our games for this week and next week. As for anime in theaters, good news, anime fans, you got stuff. First of all, today, Fireworks will be in theaters subtitled. It will also be in theaters subtitled July 5th and July 7th dubbed. Princess Mononoke will be coming to theaters July 22nd dubbed, July 23rd subbed, and July 25th dubbed. Sailor Moon R&S movies will be part of a double feature that will be in theaters July 28th dubbed and July 30th subbed. And Maquia When the Promised Flower Blooms will be in theaters July 20th through the 26th. I've only seen it listed as being at the Tivoli, but I am looking into that one because I know Mother's Basement did a video on that saying that I haven't watched it. I just saw the thumbnail where he's saying it's great and take your mom. And I'm like, okay, I'll make a note of that. We'll see Maquia When the Promised Flower Blooms. You never know. When things get recommendations like that, I just kind of go, okay, fine. I'm sure I've seen worse things in theaters, which, rest assured, I have. So that about wraps up our new games and anime for this week and next week. So yeah, it's actually kind of a slow week this week, I'm going to be honest with you. But not necessarily a bad thing. I've still got plenty of things to cover. Some of them quite ridiculous, but yes, it has definitely been a slow week. But if anyone is wondering, yes, I did pick up Fighting EX Layer. It was a very good game. You know what? We will spend a hefty chunk talking about the bizarre situation that is Fighting EX Layer sometime in the show. That sounds like a good thing to put on the schedule, because boy howdy, it's a little bit of a slow week. I'm going through the list of things happening, and it's like, not a lot. But there's always something weird and interesting slipping under the radar, so I will certainly keep you posted on things like that. Yeah. Let's see, is there anything we can talk about real quick, like, before kicking you back to the music? Oh! Number 1! The Steam Summer Sale is on. Hopefully it's still on, should still be on. I think that lasts a good bit. I know that means everyone's wallets are currently being drained because, of course, Steam has ludicrous deals on many of their games. So if there's ever been a game you wanted on Steam, now would be the time to look into it. Disappointingly, Ninja Blade is still not on sale. If you're unfamiliar, Ninja Blade is one of my favorite Xbox 360 games. It got a PC port almost around the same time it got an Xbox release. There was actually a boxed PC release way back in the day, and it's on Steam. I love it. Never played it on PC. Would totally buy it on Steam if it ever went on sale. It never does, because people forgot that game even existed. Ninja Blade's good. It's actually by From Software. It's a From Software game before the whole everything is a Souls game, which I really like. And in a lot of... Okay, I'm going to talk Ninja Blade, because it is the kind of game that, to the normal person, you look at it and you go, it's just a generic action game. What's so special about it? But me, I actually hate Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden, and I hate them because their stage design is terrible. They're all designed like Resident Evil, where the stages are pretty much just silent mazes with key items you have to find to open doors and solve puzzles. And then when you get into a fight and the fighting's really good, it's completely separate from everything else. You walk into a room, oh, this is a fight room. Now you fight things. And I hate that. Because back in the good old NES days, you were navigating the stage and platforming and fighting enemies at the exact same time. And you do that so little in modern action games, it drives me nuts. And Ninja Blade was one of the few modern action games to actually do this. But most people, I guess, just aren't annoyed by this fact. They're like, oh yeah, Devil May Cry's fine, the stage design's fine, the combat's so good, and then, you gotta have the stage so that way you can pretend there's more to it than just combat. Honestly, that's why I like Bayonetta better, because it doesn't have stage design. The stages are a straight line, it's pretty much all combat. That actually makes Bayonetta a better game to me, because I really, really, really hate the stages in Devil May Cry. You have to understand, I have a terrible sense of direction. Also, I really hate when games are just completely silent, and I hate it even more that every time you get into a fight in Devil May Cry, it boots up the battle theme from the beginning. I have a lot of beef with Devil May Cry. Great combat. Got a lot of beef with everything that isn't combat or Dante, though. Like Dante, fun character. But Ninja Blade was one of the few games to really do that, but, and this is the big but, before anyone takes my recommendation, you gotta like QTEs. Ninja Blade doesn't just have QTEs, it literally celebrates them. It is printed on the back of the box as one of its features is QTEs. As a separate difficulty level for QTEs. There is a separate high scoreboard just for your QTE scores. It has a lot of QTEs in it. Now, there's some of the best QTEs in the business. Not the best. That still will be and will always be Die Hard Arcade and Dynamite Cop, which is technically a sequel to Die Hard Arcade. That, I think, was the first game to use QTEs, actually. That was before Shenmue, and that one actually had good QTEs, because when you failed them, it didn't instantly kill you. You just, got into an extra fight or went down a different path. And I liked that, because I don't think QTEs should ever kill you. Ninja Blade, when you screw up a QTE, time rewinds and you get to do it again. Which makes people say, wow, these QTEs are extra pointless. They're kind of there to bridge the sections of stage. Because the stages are divided up into different parts where it's like, okay, here is just a battle arena section, here's a boss section, here's a weird, mini-game rail shooting section, then here's an actual platforming stage section, then another enemy section, a boss encounter section, and all those are transitioned between with QTEs. So yeah, sometime I really, put that on my list of things to do, is sit down with that game and actually do my review of it. I have a very large list of things to do that never get done. Anyway, so, the Steam summer sale is going on right now. And also, very important note, the NES Classic is back on store shelves. I forgot to report on that last week because I forgot to pay attention to it. But yes, the NES Classics are being restocked now. Stores are getting them. I managed to get my hands on one just barely. There will be another shipment. It will be a lot more like the Super Nintendo Classic, which, if you've been paying attention, has actually shown up on store shelves every now and then. Not a lot, just enough. So I would highly recommend going out there and keeping an eye on that. I will say the one I got actually had a defective AC plug thing, but you could just use any, cell phone charger to power your NES Classic. That's why they actually don't come with the power supply in Japan. That's U.S. exclusive, having to pack it with the power supply, which is goofy, but okay. And, so if that happens, if you get one and it doesn't work, be sure to try using a separate power supply. But yeah, those will be back on store shelves. They are being shipped again. Nintendo has probably been yelled at by their shareholders for producing such a limited number of the original NES Classics. So, thank goodness for that. Anyway, it's time for a quick break, and then we'll be back. So here is Brick Sidewalks by Matthias and the Pirates, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. That was This Is How We Do by Ilphonics, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind, and I'm your host, Joe. Welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noonish to 3 p.m., and, internet sure is slow around here. Trying to research some things for y'all, but it's not going. So, what have we got in the things we already know about? First of all, the Neo Geo Mini. It hits Japan July 24th. I cannot say prices, but it is about the cost of 2 full-price games. Maybe a little cheaper than that. A little hard to say. But I am very pleased by what I'm seeing with it. If you're unfamiliar with the Neo Geo Mini, first of all, the Neo Geo was a type of arcade machine and also home console. And the whole shtick of the arcade machine was that you could put 5 different games in it and switch between them. And they were all Neo Geo exclusive games. The Neo Geo was some of the most impressive hardware of the early 90s. And it remained impressive for a very long time. The Neo Geo, the last Neo Geo game was made in I want to say 2005 with Samurai Showdown 5 Special. So they kept that thing going for a while. The hardware on it was very impressive, and it was a good system, especially because due to the nature of the system where it was actually something you put cartridges in instead of building full arcade boards. It meant that if you bought a Neo Geo, buying games for it would be cheaper than buying full arcade boards, and they were cheaper to manufacture as well because, of course, rather than having to put all the hardware to run your game on your, game's board, all the hardware was in the Neo Geo itself, and it was already beefy, and this let a lot of smaller companies produce way more impressive games cheaper, sell them cheaper. The Neo Geo was just a great thing. People loved it back in the days when you could actually find arcade games in places. The Neo Geo arcade machines were everywhere, especially non-arcade places like bowling alleys and laundromats and hotel game rooms, because they can usually only get 3 machines in there, so obviously you want to put in the one that you could put 4 or 5 games in. Neo Geo was it was a nice thing back in the 90s. And a lot of the games on it were very good. And the company that makes the Neo Geo, SNK, Capcom's eternal rival, even though they've gone out of business twice now, they are producing a Neo Geo Mini. But unlike the NES Mini or the SNES Mini, this is actually a miniature arcade machine with a little screen on it. So that's actually really cool, but of course, and they actually apparently, it was at E3, people have tried it, and they've said very good things about it. But apparently the thing actually works really well, despite the small screen and the little joystick and buttons. It works quite well, but here's the best part. You don't have to play it that way. It also comes with a gamepad and an HDMI out, so you can play it on your TV. Which, of course, makes people say, well, why'd they make it a mini arcade machine? Well, because it makes it stand out. Look, every time I talk about the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, people go, it's just a little retro emulator box. I can make one of those with my Raspberry Pi, and it'll be better and cheaper. Every single time. Oh, I could do that on my Raspberry Pi. I could do that on my Raspberry Pi. You make a mini arcade machine, people will say, oh, I can do that on my Raspberry Pi, but that takes actual work. Making a miniature arcade machine takes a lot more work to produce than a little emulator box. And they're cute and adorable and very interesting. And honestly, miniature arcade machines look to be the new thing. I'm seeing them pop up everywhere. I mentioned in a previous show that there were like 3 different varieties of much cheaper ones over at Walmart. There's like 2 others on the horizon with the Coleco ones and the Replicades. And we have the Neo Geo Mini Classic thing. The interesting thing is that the Neo Geo Mini has different games depending on if it's the Japanese or American one. And for once, no, we're not actually getting screwed. Not entirely anyway. I think there's I want to say 15 games that are different. The main difference between the Japanese one and the international one is the Japanese one is all fighting games. Like, it has all the King of Fighters 1994 to 2003 on it. It has just piles and piles and piles of fighting games and almost nothing else. This is one of the big differences. The Japanese one has all the King of Fighters, but it only has Metal Slug 1, 2, 3. The international one has Metal Slug 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and X on it. It has all the Metal Slugs, but it only has, the most important KOF. So I think it has 94 or 95. It definitely has 98 and 2002. It doesn't have 03. I know 03 was kind of broken, but it's, the only one that had a tag mechanic. But, yeah, it has 98 and 2002. Those are the ones most people care about. I know it has a couple others. But yeah, it has the ones that matter. The US one still has Samurai Showdown 2, Samurai Showdown 4, and Samurai Showdown 5 Special. Those are still on the US ones. The only places I really feel like we're getting screwed over in the US one is we don't have Real Bout Fatal Fury 2. For some reason we have Real Bout 1 but not 2. I don't understand that. We don't have Twinkle Star Sprites, which is a phenomenal game. I played a tournament of it this weekend, actually. Did not do well, but I still competed in a Twinkle Star Sprites tournament. Great game. It's a weird split-screen competitive shooter. Tons of fun. And the other one we're missing out on, for me personally, is Ninja Commando, which is from the same people who made Twinkle Star Sprites, and it is a top-down shooter where the strength of your shot depends on how fast you're slamming that button. You have to press the button so fast to get maximum power shots. It is tiring as all heck, but I love Ninja Commando because of that. It was so fun to play. Because if you hit that button fast enough, then your shots get freaking huge, but you have to mash it so fast. I love Ninja Commando. I think it's a darn shame we aren't getting that one. But we get all the Metal Slugs. We get some more sports games. We have a much greater variety of games on the international release. It's pretty cool. I'm very excited to get my hands on this. Again, that goes on sale July 24th in Japan, and it'll be the cost of 2 full-price games, so a little on the pricey side, but not ludicrous for what you're getting. I'm super happy about that. But you know what isn't going to be expensive? This is quite nice. the flip grip. Apparently a thing called the flip grip for the Switch is being kickstarted. They've 3D printed a prototype, it works, and yeah, they just need to get it manufactured. It's super cheap, because it is pretty much just a wad of plastic. But what it does, the flip grip, lets you position your Nintendo Switch vertically, and then put the 2 controller halves on the side. Why would you need that? Shoot 'em ups. There are a ton of shoot 'em ups on Nintendo Switch that let you flip the screen vertically, which is known in shoot 'em up circles as tate mode. This is of course a thing because a lot of shoot 'em ups feature a vertical screen when they were released in arcades because you can see the enemies coming sooner. That's just how you make a shoot 'em up. You make it vertically oriented 90% of the time. And so many companies are taking their old shoot 'em ups, releasing them on the Nintendo eShop. There's tons of them now. And yet, weirdly, I haven't seen any that let me use the D buttons as actual buttons. When you flip your Switch vertically, I'm like, hey, I have to hold it like an Atari Lynx where I'm pressing the buttons on top and the stick on the bottom. That's kind of silly. I think there might be a way to... I think maybe if I took off the top controller, maybe it would let me use the buttons on the bottom. I need to try that tonight. But I haven't been able to use the buttons on the bottom controller, and I've always found that to be kind of ludicrous, and honestly, not exactly the best form factor for holding it. So, the flip grip will let you, hold it portably, but vertical screen, horizontal controls, it'll be very nice. And again, the main thing is that this thing is looking cheap. Obviously, not going to be for normal people. Most folks are going to be like, how many games are really going to use this flipped screen style? But for the hardcore shoot-'em-up fans who have spent much, much, much more money on shoot-'em-ups, I guarantee you, they will absolutely pounce on the flip grip. Because, hey, portable shoot-'em-upping at its finest. Good idea. Good idea, and it's one of the few Kickstarters I can look at and say that actually doesn't look like a bad idea. Unlike Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn. I've been finding out more and more about that game, and dang it, after the show, I might just swing by Family Video and see if they have a copy for rental. They probably don't. It did get a physical release. Because I would love to find out if Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn is better or worse than the original Shaq Fu. It's actually honestly looking like it might be worse, and I want to explore that. Because, look, Shaq Fu was a mess, but the people who made it tried, and I don't know if I can say the same about Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn. We'll perhaps talk a little more about that later in the show. But moving on, speaking of shoot-'em-ups, here's one that you wouldn't need a flip grip for. The Darius Cosmic Collection is coming for the Nintendo Switch, which is a very weird collection. It has, a bunch of different arcade Dariuses, but it doesn't have G Darius or Darius Gaiden, which are some of the more technically demanding Dariuses, with G Darius, I would argue, being the best. What the heck, why is G Darius not on here? I mean, it's just a PS1 game, effectively. Why is that not on this collection? What's even stranger is that there's a special edition which comes with the Super Nintendo and Genesis games, which are very nice additions, especially because many of them are actually different from their arcade counterparts. But, why aren't they in the normal edition? Why we gotta get a special edition to get half the games? The Darius Cosmic Collection kind of confuses me, and I don't understand why they aren't releasing G Darius and Darius Gaiden. Is there going to be a Darius Cosmic Collection too? Are we pulling the Mega Man Collection thing here? Whatever. Anyway, hey, speaking of release dates, Shenmue 1 and 2 have had their release dates accidentally leaked by Microsoft. August 21st. So yeah, very soon you will be able to play Shenmue 1 and 2 and be disappointed all over again. Look, Shenmue 1 was an incredible technical feat. I played it, I loved it, mostly because I could go to the arcade and play Space Harrier instead. But you gotta understand, there's not a lot of gameplay in Shenmue. Especially not the first one. I hear the second one is better. Never played the second one. But the first one, is literally just walking around like a block of town talking to people looking for sailors. There's very little combat. There's very little gameplay. It's mostly walking around and talking to people and participating in a bunch of stupid side activities like taking care of a pet cat and a bunch of things. Shenmue was kind of ludicrous because the guy who made it, Yu Suzuki, went utterly nuts with the game's detail. You can open every single drawer in the main character's house. Every single item is lovingly detailed. Every single character in town has a unique voice and a daily routine and a place where they actually live, and you can follow them around. And he went back and looked at what the weather was. The game takes place in 1985, and he looked at what the weather was like in that region in 1985 and programmed the game so it had accurate weather for each and every day. I don't know how long he had that weather, the accurate weather for, because you can't do it all the way up to 1999, but heck if he didn't probably try. And that's the problem. Shenmue focused so much on these tiny little minuscule details and dumb things that you can do that it never got around to actually putting the gameplay in. Just like the most detailed town ever rendered in a video game. And back when it came out, Shenmue was the most expensive video game ever made. It's been topped by like a couple of the Grand Theft Auto games, but back when Shenmue came out, it was one of the most expensive, and Yu Suzuki was like, oh yeah, this is going to be like a 12-part game. We're just going to keep going. And that's why Shenmue 3 mattered, because Shenmue 2 ended on a cliffhanger, and everyone wants closure to the story. It's like, can you finish the story, please, Mr. Suzuki? Oh, man. There are always some interesting tales in the history of video games. Anyway, I do believe it's time for another break, so here's My Girl by C Sharp here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Stay tuned for more GameBabble Live, but until then, enjoy the music, and thank you so much. That was Whatever You Want by Pink here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Hello and welcome back to GameBabble Live. I'm your host, Jell. Before the break, talked a little bit about Shenmue. Because, we got Shenmue 1 and 2 collection coming out August 21st. The good news is that it is going to have both a classic and modernized control scheme. Because I think the classic control scheme was some kind of clunky, sort of tank control type deal. So there'll be a more modern control scheme, and that'll be nice. And I've never played Shenmue 2, so I might pick these up. Because I'm curious about Shenmue 2. I don't know. I'll probably just watch people stream it, to be honest. Oh, yeah, that's right. The other good news about Shenmue 1 and 2, I forgot to mention this, though. Japanese voice option. If you are unfamiliar, Shenmue has a legendarily bad dub. The main character talks like a robot, and it is amazing. Maybe I should get another. He talks like that. That's a thing he says. It's, do you know where I can find sailors? So the dub was like ludicrously bad. They're going to have a Japanese voice option. You can play with the classic, I can't believe you used this for a dub. But it's, it has a Japanese voice option. So maybe for the first time in almost 20 years, you can take Shenmue seriously. Oh, boy. Moving right along, though. Speaking of Shenmue, its spiritual successor, Yakuza, continues to move right along. Yakuza 3 for PS4 has screenshots released, coming along nicely, and I think I heard something about a PC release for Yakuza 0, which is good, because I know a lot of people don't game on consoles anymore, and people kind of need to play the Yakuza series. They are some pretty darn great games. I I love them. I think they're very good. I don't like Akiyama, though. Any of the games that make you start with Akiyama, I'm like, why? But, yeah, Kiryu's great. Majima's even better. Yeah. The Yakuza series is an absolutely phenomenal game series. And if you've never played them, like, they're often described as Japanese Grand Theft Auto, and that doesn't describe them at all. In typical fashion, a thing I've noticed that Japanese open worlds tend to be way smaller, but way more detailed. And that's what Yakuza is. It takes place in this tiny little, like, chunklet of Japan known as Kamurocho for the most part. Sometimes you go to other little chunklets, but you're only talking, like, a world of a couple of blocks. But there's tons of stuff to do. There's so much plot going on. You get into random street brawls. Imagine combining an RPG with a beat-em-up set in the modern day. And that's pretty much what you're dealing with. Because it's very RPG, like, you're leveling up, you're gaining skills, you got items to use, there's shops to go to, equipment to get to a degree, and you get into random battles with enemies on the street, but yeah, it's literally like street punks going, hey man, give me all your money, and then you beat the ever-loving crap out of them. And, in the more recent Yakuza games, especially ones on PS3 and PS4, they don't even have a transition into the battles, just when you get into a fight, the boundaries of the arena is like all the other people on the street crowd around to watch you beat these guys up. And it just happens right there on the spot. And those games are amazing, and the brutality in them is incredible. Because you have these things called heat actions, where you can, like, take objects and smash them over people's heads, and they're basically super-powered finishing moves, and they're not like Mortal Kombat at all. It's like one of the most amazing things. They're not all that bloody. They're not like Mortal Kombat, but the way they're shot, the way they have these scenes set up, makes them look like the most painful thing you will ever see in a video game. When you beat someone upside the head with a bicycle, it's incredibly visceral. When you slam their face into a brick wall, it looks like it hurts. When you stomp them into the pavement, you will cringe. It causes me to wince sometimes because it's done so well. Those heat actions are amazing. And yeah, Yakuza's a really fun game series. So I'm glad they're going to be bringing the rest of them to PS4. I especially look forward to a PS4 release of Yakuza 5, since that's the only one that didn't get a boxed release in America, other than the Samurai spin-off games that never came to America at all. Yakuza 5 is... The reason I like Yakuza 5 is that in the middle of the game, you play as Kiryu's adopted daughter, Haruka, who's trying to become an idol singer. And the whole game just turns into a crazy dancing game, while simultaneously commenting on the seedy underbelly of being an idol singer in Japan. There's a lot of weird, uncomfortable scenes, but at the same time, you're getting into dance battles in the middle of the street and putting on these big, crazy idol performances with magical girl transformations into different costumes in the middle of a game about Yakuzas murdering one another. Yeah. Yakuza's kind of an interesting series sometime, and it makes me happy. I am glad that Yakuza 0 should be coming to PC, so that way more people can experience the magic of the series. You've probably heard a lot about Yakuza 0. This is actually a question, as you can tell from that, the other Yakuza games are really good. Because one of the things I heard someone say on a stream was, every time people talk about Yakuza, they always talk about Yakuza 0, Yakuza 0. Is it that none of the other Yakuza games are relevant? Absolutely not. All of the Yakuza games are still good. I would still say Yakuza 1 on PS2 is still pretty good, but Yakuza 0 is a prequel to 1. And so it's a great starting point. You start with Yakuza 0. Then you play Yakuza Kiwami, which is a remake of 1, then Kiwami 2 is a remake of 2, and then they're porting 3, 4, 5 to PS4 as well, so you can play through, and then 6 is actually made on PS4. So you can play through the whole series, all 7 games of it, from start to finish on the PS4. That's the plan. And yeah, they're all good games. That's why Yakuza 3 is just being like ported instead of completely overhauled like Kiwami 1 and 2. Is that Yakuza 3 still holds up pretty decently on its own. They don't really need to completely remake it the way they did 1 and 2, since they were PS2 games. They looked a bit dated, had a little bit of clunk to them. Yakuza 3, though, perfectly good the way it is. And yeah, so I'm really happy that they're bringing the whole series to PS4. I'm glad we're starting to see some theoretically show up on PC. Absolutely a great series. Give it a spin. It's a shame it took this long for it to really catch on in America. But moving on. Ichigo, Rukia, and Aizen from Bleach are confirmed for Jump Ultimate. Why did I write Jump Ultimate Stars? No. Jump Force! They're confirmed for Jump Force! Different Jump crossover fighter. Jump Force was revealed at E3, and it is some kind of crazy game where all these anime and manga characters come to the real world and fight it out. So you have Goku fighting Frieza in the middle of New York City, and they're going for, like, kind of realistic-ish graphics. It looks pretty neat, although the reports I've heard from E3 say that it's not the best, especially the frame rate. So we'll see how that turns out. It's very curious. It's a interesting game. There's something kind of special about seeing Monkey D. Luffy from One Piece perched atop an American flag. But that was certainly in the E3 trailer, and it was amazing. Let's see. Moving on. Hey, Overwatch is adding a new hero. Wrecking Ball. It's a hamster in, like, a hamster ball mech. So, that's a thing. Also, guess what else is coming in August? Blade Strangers. Blade Strangers is the weird crossover fighting game that features Isaac from Binding of Isaac, Shovel Knight, Quote and Curly from Cave Story, as well as a good chunk of the cast of Code of Princess, because it was originally going to be a Code of Princess fighting game. And yeah, it is a 2D fighter. Looks kind of neat. Good times. Moving on even further. Toe Jam and Earl Back in the Groove closed beta is July 5th through the 19th. Launches in fall. Yes, there is a new Toe Jam and Earl game coming out. Yes, it's in 2D. Yes, the chick from Toe Jam and Earl 3 is an unlockable character. But yes, it's going to play much more like the original Toe Jam and Earl. It's made by the original creator. It was kickstarted. It's a thing. Personally, I'm honestly not a big fan of Toe Jam and Earl. I've tried. I just can't get into it. But I'm glad that the game is coming out, and hopefully people who like Toe Jam and Earl will enjoy it. Although, it's kind of a topic for later in the show, is the fact that I'm starting to wonder if anything kickstarted can please people. Moving on. So, Chrono Trigger on PC is still getting patched. This is silly. This is just freaking silly. Yes, there's a Steam release of Chrono Trigger, which was a straight port of the cell phone version of Chrono Trigger, which essentially took the Super Nintendo game and kind of screwed it up. And they screwed it up more on PC with, like, awful filters and a terrible interface, and it just looked bad. And pretty much everyone just said, why don't I just emulate it on Super Nintendo? Because this is bad. And that's kind of embarrassing when you jump through all these hoops to make this PC version of a game, and you'd be better off just, throwing it in an emulator, which, yes, has questionable legality. You know what? That's one of those areas where I would love to know more about that legal gray area. If you bought Chrono Trigger on PC, does that legally entitle you to emulate it if you don't have the cartridge? It's a good question. And I do think it is a legal gray area. I know from a personal standpoint, I would feel the answer would be yes, but I'm sure from a technical standpoint, it might be no. It's a weird area. And even if it is illegal, no one cares, because that PC release is a freaking embarrassment. How you screw up a Steam release of a Super Nintendo game that badly. Moving on further, Mega Man X5 is restoring the original boss names, meaning no Duff McWhalen, much to some people's disappointment. For anyone unfamiliar, Mega Man X5 inexplicably gave all of the bosses weird Guns N' Roses inspired names, just out of nowhere. Because, okay, the names in the Mega Man X series are goofy. In the US, they generally go with something basic like Ice Penguin, Magma Dragoon. In Japan, they get a little bit silly, like Lightning Beatbot. Instead of like Lightning Beetle, it would be Lightning Beatbot. And then, like, some of them were just a little bit sillier than they normally would be. Sting Wasper probably is one. I'm not 100% sure. Kind of pulling that one out of my butt. But for some reason, for Mega Man X5, out of nowhere, they were like, yeah, no, we're going to give them Guns N' Roses inspired names. Duff McWhalen. Obviously, for the re-release in the Mega Man X collection, they were like, maybe we might get sued for this, so let's give everyone their actual names, which I think Duff McWhalen is the only one people are complaining about, because Duff McWhalen is an amazing name. An amazingly stupid name, but an amazing name. And let's see. Other than that, I guess I could talk about Rival Megagun, which I'm mildly interested in. It's basically an indie Twinkle Star Sprites clone. Mentioned Twinkle Star Sprites earlier, and that I competed in a tournament for it. If you've never played it, Twinkle Star Sprites is a Neo Geo game that combines the puzzle game style of attacking with the shoot 'em up. Basically, you and an opponent each have your own side of the screen. Screen split in two. You and your opponent are flying along, and these enemies show up. And when you pop an enemy, it creates a chain reaction. You shoot at them, top-down shooter, shoot at an enemy, they explode, it creates a chain reaction that throws a fireball at your opponent. And your opponent is making chain reactions throwing fireballs at you. And you can actually shoot at the fireballs or get them caught up in chain reactions to bounce them back at your opponent, and then they become a flashing fireball, and then you shoot at a flashing fireball, and it becomes a character-specific special attack. If you send enough fireballs back at your opponent, they merge together into a boss attack, effectively your super move. It's a very simple game, but it gets incredibly frantic, because, of course, you and your opponent are popping enemies like crazy in this top-down shooter and just sending waves and waves and waves of junk at one another, desperately trying to overpower each other. And the game is incredibly fun. And weirdly, there aren't a lot of games like that. There are some. The most notable, of course, being the Toho game Phantasmagoria of Flower View and its distant predecessor, Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream, which Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream which is like the third Toho game ever. It's one of the PC 98 ones, okay? That one wears its Twinkle Star Sprites inspiration right on its sleeve. It has this scientist girl whose jetpack looks identical to Arthur Schmidt's from Twinkle Star Sprites. There was no PC 98 version of Twinkle Star Sprites, so Zun decided to make his own. Makes sense. So a lot of people know Phantasmagoria of Flower View. From a personal standpoint, I prefer Twinkle Star Sprites. It's sort of a Marvel vs. Capcom 2 versus Super Turbo kind of thing. I think that Phantasmagoria of Flower View is a little overdone and overwhelming with its, bullet hell patterns and stuff, and it's like, I don't feel like I'm quite impacting the opponent. I feel they overcomplicated things, and I can still see it as being a good game. I get why people like it, but I think the simplicity of Twinkle Star Sprites makes it a much cleaner game. One of the major things about Twinkle Star Sprites is that the enemies can't kill you. Only the stuff your opponent is throwing at you can. They can stun you. They could do like half a heart of damage, but you can't be killed by the enemies. And the enemies don't shoot at you either. They are just tools for you to pop to send garbage to your opponent's side of the screen. Other than this, I remember one other Dojin game that played like Twinkle Star Sprites. There was a Korean MMO that closed down, of course, that played like Twinkle Star Sprites. Well, now we have an indie game coming out called Rival Megagun. that is also going to play like Twinkle Star Sprites. To me, personally, it's a little bit disappointing because every other Twinkle Star Sprites clone has actual, like, characters you select that you see in action. Because they're usually, like, little witches on brooms and stuff for characters. Rival Megagun is the first one I've seen to, well, I guess that Korean MMO was also spaceships. But Rival Megagun is very much characters in spaceships. It looks much more like a normal shooter. Almost to its own detriment, because it looked like the stages actually have a degree of design to them, and that there's a variety of enemies that attack you, and that the enemies actually shoot back at you. I'm a little iffy on that. But its main gimmick is that when you do a boss attack in Rival Megagun, rather than just passively sending a boss to your opponent, you actually turn into the boss and fly to your opponent's side of the screen. Which I found out there was some old arcade game, just found out about this over the weekend, called Charge Airblader, I believe, which was actually built around a mechanic like this. It was a different competitive shooter, but it was actually literally two people, one at the bottom of the screen, one at the top of the screen, shooting at one another, and you could transform into a boss. Or was it Change Airblader? Something like that. Airblader, regardless. So we've seen this mechanic before, and combining Twinkle Star Sprites and Change Airblader will certainly please a good chunk of people, but I do wonder if, once again, they're missing some of the nuance of Twinkle Star Sprites. I look forward to giving it a spin, though, but I do think that there's a certain nuance to how Twinkle Star Sprites makes sure that it is just the junk you are sending at your opponent that is harming them. That it isn't just, oh, the opponent accidentally bumped into a random computer-controlled enemy. Oh, a stray bullet bonked into him. No, Twinkle Star Sprites, I kind of love the fact that it's not bullet hell, that it's not doing these hypnotic patterns, that you're being overwhelmed by giant smiling fireballs and winged pigs. They're big, and they're bright, and they're colorful, and they're easy to see, and they're just as overwhelming as bullets, except they don't, like, trick you into thinking they're worse than they really are, which is, like, the secret of bullet hell games, is that, like, a lot of times there's a certain, you can memorize the patterns, and you figure out that really all, like, 90% of the bullets are just flash and show, and you weave between things. It's a thing. I like how Twinkle Star Sprites does things, is what I'm saying. I think it is a very good game. But I'm interested in seeing how Rival Megagun turns out, because apparently people really like Charge Airblader, or Change Airblader, People like that game. And the fact that they are combining Airblader and Twinkle Star Sprites, I think will make a lot of people happy. Not sure about myself. So, really cool that is a game that is coming out. Anyway, time for a break. And then, when we get back, we will talk about Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night, the Castlevania successor of sorts. Until then, here's Guatemala by Sway Lee, Slim Jimmy, and Ray Stremmer. Here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. That was Color Green by New Politics, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noonish to 3 p.m. So, I am here to talk about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. For anyone unfamiliar, Konami, a couple years back, kind of imploded. Classic video game company, started treating all of its employees like garbage, pretty much canceled all of their major video game products, and has done nothing but make pachinko machines. Since then, most of the people who worked at Konami have left, and really all Konami's done is other companies have popped up and said, can we license this game out and re-release it? Konami's going, yeah, sure, why not, whatever. You want to make a new Bomberman? Sure, go ahead. Oh, you want to do a VR version of Zone of the Enders 2? Whatever, I don't know. We're making money off it? Cool. So that's the current state of Konami, which is to say, bad. Konami's kind of a mess. And that means Castlevania is pretty much over. There's a new cell phone Castlevania coming out, but I don't know. So Koji Igarashi, who's been in charge of the Castlevania series since Symphony of the Night, left, saw that everyone was making Kickstarters, made one himself to do a game called Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which was basically going to be, hey, we're going to do a new Castlevania, it's just not called Castlevania, and everyone knew that's what the deal was. They threw money at it. Well, a couple weeks back, maybe about a month ago, a 8-bit prequel non-canon spin-off game for the series came out, and it was apparently really, really good. I haven't picked it up yet. I think I'm going to, though. That spin-off game looks really, really promising, the 8-bit one. And everything I've seen about it looks like a good game. And that's out. But the other day, maybe a couple days ago, a new backer demo for the main game, Ritual of the Night. The other one was like Curse of the Moon, something of the Moon. This one's Ritual of the Night. And a new backer demo came out, and I saw a little bit of it being played, and oh my god, I hate the way the whip works. Haven't played it myself, didn't back the game, I admit. I don't back a lot of things. I backed Shantae, and that was pretty much it. But the way the whip works looks terrible. Because for some reason, the main girl whips it at a downward angle. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. I realize that half the reason I like Castlevania is the whip, which, yes, for the record, no, I don't like Symphony of the Night, and whenever I play it, I always play in Richter mode. Always. Richter mode required. I need my whip. There's no point in playing a Castlevania if I don't have a whip. I love, whip is probably my second favorite weapon after claws. I love using a whip. And, yeah, it's looking like the whip in this game is pretty bad, but the whip in the 8-bit one looks fine. But that's not the only problem. I've been looking at some of the comments, and it looks like people are a little disappointed in the game, finding that the controls are not as good as they should be, that the game feels a little lacking, that maybe there's a bit too much plot, way too much talking and cutscenes, and people are a little iffy on the game, on top of the fact that since one of the characters who died in the prequel game is alive in the main game, people are like, well, I guess that prequel game was non-canon. Apparently the 8-bit game has 5 different endings, though, and he survives in one of them, so maybe that's the canon ending. But a lot of people are saying, no, that's a non-canon spin-off. Whatever. Either way, people are kind of being a little disappointed in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. And they're like, yeah, maybe we didn't actually need this. Maybe this isn't all that great. And I find that all very interesting. I'm starting to wonder if there's any Kickstarter games that don't disappoint people. Pretty much everything that's been Kickstarted has disappointed people, and that even includes my own Shantae. Look, I still love the Shantae series, and Half Genie Hero is a really good game, but I do feel rather disappointed by it. I felt it was too short. I felt the backtracking was way too much padding. Yes, they've added more to the game with DLC, but it's just replaying those same stages over and over and over again. And as good as those stages are, eventually you can only remix them so many times and you get kind of sick of it. I think Shantae Half Genie Hero is a good game, but not a great game. I would definitely say Pirate's Curse is a better game, and not because of, the pirate items, but because it was a more polished game, but that's because it also spent more time in development. Shantae Half Genie Hero spent about 3 years in development, whereas Pirate's Curse was 5 years. It's kind of nuts. So, but I am starting to wonder, are there any Kickstarted games that don't disappoint people? The sad fact of the matter is, I don't think Kickstarters are a very good idea, especially for big video games. Because in order to entice people, they put up all these, Kickstarter bonuses. And those take a hefty chunk out of the funding for the game in order to get those bonuses made. And for the record, there's a good chance that most, if not all of the bonuses for kickstarting a game, if that game gets any degree of popularity, those will just be sold to the public. Pretty much all of my backer rewards for Shantae are available to the public, and I don't have any of them yet, by the way, because they're not shipping them until they have them all done, and they're still waiting on a few products. And so, the backer rewards are one problem, because they cost the company a huge chunk of money. That's a huge chunk of what you've donated to get this game made. On top of that, the the amount of money you can make on Kickstarter is generally very, very small in the grand scheme of game development. It works if you're an indie dev. If you're an indie dev making a game in your spare time because you want to make the game, then a Kickstarter works out because you're working a lot for free. You're using the backers to help you get necessary things to release the game. But if you work at an actual company, trying to pay people like a salary, an hourly wage, or anything, trying to properly pay your employees off Kickstarter bucks, not gonna work. And as such, you wind up having to either get other investors or you're actually making a game on a really small budget. People don't really realize how expensive it is to make a game. And so it is one of those questionable things, because like $200 to you and $200 to a video game developer mean completely different things. You look at a Kickstarter making $500,000 and you go, yo, that's a lot of money. Whereas to a game developer, $500,000, that's a drop in the bucket. They are making a game. All Kickstarter games are technically ludicrously low budget. And they all feel that way. That's the thing. Because you're funding these games at the conception level, when they are maybe barely even in alpha. And so you know about these games often 3 years or more ahead of time. And then, you're spending 3 years waiting and waiting and waiting, and there's so much hype and anticipation for this game to come out. And you're looking at the sheer amount of money that you donated because you probably paid well over $100 because you were so excited for this game and you wanted to support your favorite series. And then the game comes out and it's like barely even counts as a budget title. And you're just like, ew, what's this? This is, I thought I was going to get something better. I think that's like the general consensus on Kickstarted games. That's how a lot of them come out, because one of the things that's always said when someone backs a game and they get disappointed is, this game made X amount of money. And to us, the normal consumers, X amount of money looks like a lot, and to the big game publishers and developers, X amount of money is a drop in the bucket and barely worth anything. And that's not even getting into having to cover the backer rewards, which sometimes can take up like half the cost of making the freaking game. Like half the cost of what's being kickstarted. Honestly, Kickstarters are kind of a bad idea unless you are a very, very, very small developer only releasing on PC or PC and a console. Certainly not if you're releasing on multiple consoles, because, egad, that is a nightmare. And, yeah, it's small. That's the thing. Like, you gotta stay small, so that way when someone donates $200, it's something you're actually grateful for. You're like, thank you, this will go a long way. If that amount of money doesn't go a long way, then, yeah, you're in trouble with your Kickstarter. And yeah, and this is all very interesting because, of course, the big Kickstarter boom was about 3-4 years ago. All of those games that were kickstarted when everyone was like, oh man, Kickstarter's the way to go. Look at all the money Mighty Number 9 is making. All of the games from the big Kickstarter boom are now being finished. They're all coming home to roost now. And we're beginning to realize maybe this didn't work out as well as we had hoped. And that's where a lot of these games are getting caught up. Because, literally I have not heard of a Kickstarted game that didn't disappoint. Okay, I should clarify. I have not heard of a Kickstarted game that has gotten a console release that didn't disappoint its backers. All of them have. And so I am curious, Bloodstained looks like one of the most promising ones. Visually, it's quite appealing. I can safely say Koji Igarashi is putting in the work. But, I don't know. I don't know. And certainly this isn't the only Kickstarter that has disappointed people. Because there's also, and I think this is one of the most amusing ones, Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn. Now, Shaq Fu was a ridiculous fighting game on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis starring Shaquille O'Neal. And believe it or not, it has gone down in history as one of the worst fighting games ever made. It needs to be clarified that Shaq Fu is remembered as one of the worst fighting games ever made because it's Shaq Fu. Because it is a ludicrous idea, making a fighting game starring Shaquille O'Neal. That would be a thing. But that's how the 90s were. And at the time, back when it came out, no one made a deal about it. Shaq Fu happened, okay, just another fighting game, whatever. It wasn't until years later that people looked back on it and said, really, we made a fighting game starring Shaquille O'Neal, this is the stupidest thing ever, and it is now remembered as one of the worst fighting games ever made. Now, it is not a good fighting game, but I would argue about it being one of the worst. Believe it or not, it's actually made by a very competent company, Delphine Software, who are the makers of Prince of Persia, Another World, and Karateka. Their games are known for their cinematic style and silky smooth rotoscoped animation, and Shaq Fu is no exception. Shaq Fu actually had gorgeous animation. The sprites in that game actually looked good, but they were way too small. And this was a problem. It was a skilled video game developer that knew nothing about fighting games. The sprites were way too small. Everything had way too much recovery. The stages were too big and difficult to traverse, and it had a bunch of really weird mechanics that no one paid attention to. And I need to emphasize that. No one. Like, a lot of people, they're probably just hopping around the stage and getting annoyed by how much jumping they have to do. There is this weird dash mechanic that involves, like, holding a shoulder button and pressing forward. And, yeah, like, it's a mechanic. It's weird. It's a very weird fighting game. And it's not good. But it's far from the worst. It is certainly far more responsive than certain other fighting games I've played. So, let's hold our horses on that. Either way, I find it funny because everyone talks about Shaq Fu. Everyone complains about Shaq Fu. It's such a joke. It's such a meme. And yet no one really knows about it. They maybe played a round or two of it, went, oh yeah, yup, this is the worst fighting game ever, and put it aside. Our station manager, I was talking about how disappointed I was that Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn didn't make any reference to the plot of Shaq Fu. And he said, Shaq Fu has a plot? Yes! You start up story mode, and there is a plot to Shaq Fu. There is a story mode, complete with an intro cutscene. You see, plot of Shaq Fu is that Shaquille O'Neal, on his way to a charity basketball game in Japan, because of course, stumbles across this alleyway, and there's a mysterious shop, and he goes in there, and, like, the old guy who runs the shop is like, you need to go to this other world and rescue this kid, and so he, like, walks into a magic closet and is transported to an alternate world where a kid, I think named Nezu, is kidnapped by an evil mummy man named Set, and he has to fight cat girls and demons. It is a stupid plot, but it's a plot. I mean, I'm sure most people don't even know that Shaq Fu is not the name of Shaquille O'Neal's fighting style. It's actually Shaqito. Yes, seriously. I bring all this up because this was why, as soon as Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn was announced, I was skeptical of it. Because I looked at it and I said, there's no references to Shaq Fu in here. Number one, it's not even a fighting game. It's a beat-em-up. Side-scrolling beat-em-up. Okay. Well, does he throw shakurikens? No. Is Beast the demon thing that, like, in the ending came to the human world and started playing basketball? Is he in the game? No. Do I see any sign of Kaori? No. Do I see any sign of anything that resembles Shaq Fu? No. Oh, then you're not making a Shaq Fu, you're making a Shaq Down. Big important difference. Shaq Down is a series of cell phone games. And yeah, no, this is... I just looked at it, I said, this isn't Shaq Fu. You can't sell me on this being Shaq Fu if there's no references to it. I get that Shaq Fu is a running joke, but you gotta keep the joke up. If it's Shaq Fu in name only, what's the point? And their whole catchphrase was, this time we won't F it up. Well, the game came out, and word on the street is they've F'd it up. I'm trying to figure out a way to rent it, because I would love to compare the original Shaq Fu versus Shaq Fu Legend Reborn. It does not look like a good game. Apparently a lot of features are missing. Like, it was supposed to have co-op. Co-op's not there. It was supposed to have a big meaty move list. Apparently, move list, pretty darn small. Apparently, it was even supposed to have, like, custom characters and online play. Well, that's not there. So, what does it have? Well, it's a single-player beat-em-up starring Shaq with some really annoying, like, puzzle rooms in it. And I haven't heard good things about it. The weirdest thing is, of course, since it's Shaq Fu is the thing about the game, they, of course, made it a wacky, jokey, silly game with lots of little jokes and references that, by the time the game actually got finished, are incredibly, incredibly dated. And also almost comically offensive. Like, egad, Shaq Fu Legend Reborn is honestly the kind of game you look at and say, you couldn't make this game today, except they made this game today. And that's the thing. I don't like it when people go, oh, you couldn't make that kind of game today. And I do agree with that. At this point, it's not the fact that jokes are... The issue with the game isn't the fact that the jokes are offensive, it's that they're bad. They're just very, very basic jokes. Most of which are just not funny. Like, oh, fat guy so fat. Like, it's that kind of joke, okay? It's like, wow. It's like they made a checklist of people to offend with this game. It is kind of amazing. And, yeah, apparently it doesn't play well. Doesn't look great. Honestly, just kind of weird. And now the question is, which is worse? Shaq Fu or Shaq Fu Legend Reborn? And it is honestly a debate because, of course, half the people are saying, wow, this is even worse than the original, and the other half are like, well, at least it's better than the original because nothing can be worse than the original. And I would love to actually settle that debate. I would love to sit down with that game, but the problem is I don't want to spend money on Shaq Fu Legend Reborn. Like, really? No, I'm not going to pay money for this game. It's Shaq Fu, a Legend Reborn. And I have not heard a single person actually enjoy the game. So, a little on the fence. Anyway, time for a break. So, yeah, it's time for us to take a break. So here is, let's see, how about Wonderful by KC Veggies featuring Ty Dolla $ign here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please stay tuned for more. That was Enemy by Drowning Pool here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. Welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon-ish to 3 p.m. So, I just found something fun out. Apparently, The Walker and 18 Floors have both come out for PlayStation VR today. You'll notice it wasn't on the list, because it's never on the list. I'm going to be honest, I've actually taken a small break from PSVR content after One Piece Grand Cruise. Had a lot of fun with it. Good times were had. But then E3 came up, and I was distracted by a million other things. I haven't been playing PSVR constantly. As you know, I'm one of the people who actually really loves my PlayStation VR. And I was just thinking about that. I'm like, I was really liking the PSVR, but it hasn't seemed like anything really interesting has come out. I mean, to the top a little bit, but other than that, I was like, yeah. But I knew stuff was coming, but I was starting to get worried. Because normally, there's a new PlayStation VR game every single freaking week. And the past couple months, I've been following the PSVR subreddit and finding out about these games. They're coming out, and there are all these things. But yeah, there was just a new game every single week for the PlayStation VR, but I just haven't been paying much attention. And this is a good example of that. I was starting to think that we were starting to fall off the weekly release train. I was wrong. No, we're still getting weekly releases. I just wasn't paying attention. That's the thing. In order to find out that there's a bunch of things coming out for PlayStation VR, you have to watch the store like a hawk. You have to be involved with the community, because the honest truth is that the video game industry does not like VR. They are not talking about it. They are not discussing it. And as such, you don't find out about these things. So, what is 18 Floors and The Walker? Well, they're two Chinese-made horror-themed games. 18 Floors looks like something that's actually a proper horror game, and I'm actually kind of interested in it. Well, pretty much after playing The Pupil Wandering, I was actually really enjoying that. And I normally hate horror games, but horror in VR, a little bit more intriguing. A little bit more freaking terrifying, but I'm a little bit more intrigued here. But at the same time, weekend, I hated Resident Evil 7. I know everyone else likes it, but I just hate Resident Evil. But I was really enjoying that. I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of horror games. Apparently, they just released this weird episodic The Exorcist horror game for PSVR, and that's apparently really good. At least that's what I'm hearing. I have not tried it myself, but I'm kind of interested in it. So 18 Floors, Chinese-made horror game, and then the Walker is a horror-themed game, but you actually play an exorcist, and you have a gun and a sword and magic talismans. You're exorcising demons in the streets of Shanghai, and I'm like, sounds like a good time to me. You're giving me a sword, and it looks like the swordplay might actually be pretty good, so I'm going to be looking into picking that one up tonight, because, again, melee combat in VR is a thing I love. You give me one-to-one sword control, and I am a happy camper. So I look forward to maybe giving that one a shot, maybe tonight, maybe sometime later this week, I don't know. But I need to hop back on that VR train and pay attention to these things. But that is one of the most frustrating things. Like I mentioned, like a week or two ago, there were like 30 VR games at E3, and no one noticed them. Sony had like a PSVR tower with 15 games that you could demo on the show floor. I don't think anyone really talked about them. VR is very much its own separate industry at this point, because the gaming industry the video game industry doesn't seem to want to acknowledge VR even existing. They don't want to mess with it, and I find that really disappointing, because it's like because then of course everyone who's into video games who isn't like paying super close attention to VR thinks that VR has flopped, it's failed, it's pointless. Why are they even making VR games? It's a waste of everyone's time and money. When in reality, it's building up. Again, we're still not at the point where it's hit mainstream. The only AAA-ish VR games you're going to get are like the first-party Sony ones, or anything that Sony money hats, like Farpoint, which is like quickly becoming the PSVR's greatest strength, is that even though the PS4 is kind of weak for VR and the PSVR is not considered the greatest headset, the game library is the most intriguing because it actually has a tiny handful of AAA games, because Sony is willing to money hat these things. In fact, Sony has actually, outright said, we're in this for the long haul. We spent like 6 years developing the PlayStation VR, and we understand we're going to lose money on this, but we're willing to take a loss for a little bit if it encourages other developers to make games for it. So they have first-party games coming. The next two big ones are, of course, Blood and Truth, which is, they're basically expanded versions of things we had launch demos for. Blood and Truth is basically an expanded version of the London Heist. The London Heist was packed in that PSVR Worlds disc, and it was a beautiful looking, like, cinematic, you're a gangster in London, and you're talking with people, and you're smoking a cigar, and you're getting in these car chases, and you're shooting at things. It wound up kind of being a rail shooter, but one with, like, really, really pretty graphics and actual acting and characters getting all up in your face, and you could grab all sorts of stupid objects everywhere, and a lot of people considered it a really cool demo. The other one is Astrobot Robot Rescue. You see, one of the things you can download for free for your PSVR is the Playroom VR. Completely free download, and most of the Playroom VR games are multiplayer games where one person's in the VR headset and the others are playing outside the VR headset, and they're getting two separate video streams, and that's kind of cool. You know, some of those are pretty neat, but the one good single-player one was one called Robo Rescue, which was basically a third-person 3D platformer played in VR. You played like a giant overseeing robot, and you look at your PlayStation controller, which you see in VR, and a little tiny robot pops out of it. And then you remote control the little tiny robot, and you follow along behind it, and it's rescuing all these other robots and throws them into your controller to rescue them. And it's like, okay, that's super cute and adorable, and it was really, really fun. It was a solid 3D platformer. They made one stage. It was one level long. And everyone who played that game loved it. Was like, I need a full game of this, I need a full game of this, I need a full game of this. And now, they're delivering. Full game of Robo Rescue is in development, looks promising. I finally sat down and watched the trailer. Looks like it's going to be tons of fun, because it looks like literally the same thing but more. Oh, hey, take that game, only now there's boss fights. Now there's ways that you can use your controller to, like, throw shurikens. You throw giant shurikens, then your little remote control robot can jump on the shurikens like platforms and stuff like that. So there's more ways you interact with the environment in order to give yourself more things to platform on. More, like, goofy VR gimmicks, like they showed a boss fight against a giant gorilla that, like, spits in your face and your headset gets all messy and stuff. And it's like, okay, this fun, goofy gimmicks, I'm on board. This looks like a fun time. And so now I need to sit down and play this Chinese exorcism game, which could be awesome or could be terrible. Like I've mentioned this in the past, it's interesting because China is really jumping on the VR bandwagon because it's an open market. You know, VR is not dominated by Japan or America yet. No one really knows who's going to dominate in VR. And so a lot of Chinese companies, because China has recently come into a lot of money, they're like, this is our chance to make a name for ourselves in the game industry, to really stand out and do something. And so we've seen a lot of interesting Chinese games, because, yeah, the VR market is kind of small. So their games stand out more if they're willing to put some money into it. And from the trailer, the walker looks promising. Don't know about the gameplay. It could at any time turn into Lunar Stone. Which, if you've never seen it, Lunar Stone, I have never felt embarrassed for the characters in a video game before. But Lunar Stone, man, I feel bad for everyone involved in Lunar Stone. Those poor character models with animation and voices. They need a hug. I have hugged them in VR and told them it's gonna be alright. Because they needed it. Yeah, Lunar Stone is a disaster. I streamed it. You can find a stream on the GameBabble YouTube channel. I was not prepared for the end credits. The game, it's like 2 stages and then the final boss fight. It's terrible. Oh, the problem with Lunar Stone is that none of the characters can act. The plot is stupid and, like, tries really hard to be cool anime, but it doesn't work. And it doesn't make any sense, and it's only 2 stages and a boss, and it's just terrible. Nothing works. Nothing works the way it's supposed to. Everything is an embarrassment. I felt so bad for those characters. It's like, it's what Lunar Stone reminded me of was like a bunch of people in like high school thinking that they're going to make the coolest haunted house ever. And they dress up in their anime cosplay, and they have this big dramatic plot, and then they sit down and they do it, and they realize they look really dumb in their costumes, that their plot is stupid, and that none of them can act. That's what Lunar Stone is like. And they've already charged people money to go to their haunted house, so they gotta go through with it. And then they feel so embarrassed. That's what Lunar Stone feels like. Certainly a surreal experience, feeling so bad for video game characters. That's power of VR right there. That sense of presence, that need to give them a hug. Yeah. Yep. That's a thing. Hey, there's a news story I haven't reported on yet. Smash Ultimate. Yes, they have confirmed Super Smash Bros. Ultimate will not have every stage. However, we have already counted at least 75 stages in the game. So, they're not skimping there. No joke, Game Explain apparently did this. Like, actually, a number of people have, because people are like, oh, what stages are in the game? Well, there's tons of character clips and videos and trailer-y things for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So people have been looking at it, and they go, I know that stage, I know that stage, I don't know that stage, that's clearly a new stage. So they take a picture, and they mark them all down, and there's like a big chart where they're like, these are the stages in the game. Apparently we're up to 75 now. 75 stages. I don't think I can complain about the lack of stages in the game. I'm really holding out hope for Fountain of Dreams. Because Fountain of Dreams was one of the best Melee stages. Mostly because it's just friggin' pretty and had good music. And was a very simple stage. Like, if we weren't doing Hyrule Temple, we were doing Fountain of Dreams. Nice, basic, simple, pretty stage with great music. It's one of the best Smash Brothers stages, if you ask me. But as it is, we've got, I think it's Celadon City coming back, which is something I've always wanted. That was the N64 Pokemon stage. And I just found it interesting just because, it was an actual Pokemon location and not just Pokemon Stadium. Having said that, the Pokemon Stadium is a fantastic battle arena, but I'm really interested in going back to Celadon City. I think Foreside's back too, which we liked that one. Can I just say, real quick, I really like the stages in Melee more than Brawl. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, one of my big beefs with it was the stages, and a lot of that was because most of the stages could be described as platforms floating in front of something. And I know you're going to say, well, that's what all Smash Bros. Stages are. No, not really. You go back to the N64 game in Melee, and the Smash Brothers stages, you are actually on the stage. In Celadon City, you're on top of the buildings. In Onett Town, you're jumping on these awnings and on the roofs of these buildings. Is it Wispy Wood? The Kirby stage with Wispy Woods in it. You're actually in the stage. And that's important to me. I liked the fact that I was in the stage, that the platforms, even if it was just platforms floating there, that they made sense. When I played Smash Brothers on Wii, when I played Brawl, every time I was like, I don't feel like I'm in the stage. I feel like these are platforms floating in front of a stage. And that always annoyed me. So I'm very happy to see so many returning stages, and I love seeing stages that do try to incorporate the platforms into the stage. Those always make me happy. And so, yeah, I'm happy to see so many stages for Smash. I'm happy to see Smash Ultimate. I'm really, really ludicrously excited for this game. They got Daisy in it. I'm happy. Daisy and Ridley, we're in business, folks. I'm so happy about this. Also, one more thing I forgot to mention. I was going to mention this in my Shaq Fu rant. they have released the DLC for Shaq Fu, which is apparently, I guess, free if you own the physical copy, ? And that would be Barack Fu, The Legend of Dirty Barry. Yes, it is a DLC where you play as Barack Obama and you go to beat up Kanye West. Someone thought this was funny. This is what I mean by timely jokes with with Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn. Whatever, it's free DLC. Maybe Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn was a bad idea. And yeah, as a lot of people have pointed out, okay, this needs to be addressed, I think. Some people have pointed out that memes don't make good games, because, of course, there was also the new Bubsy game that was kickstarted. And people were like, oh, that was so terrible, too. From my understanding, the Bubsy game was not actually terrible. It was terribly short. Like, it ends like... It feels like only a third of a game. It ends way too fast. Probably didn't get enough funding to be a full game. But the fact that Bubsy, the new Bubsy game has a physical release and costs an amount of money is really embarrassing. But I do hear it's actually okay. I hear that it actually plays all right. The pounce mechanic is actually kind of fun. Controls are responsive. But that it gets the joke. I think the new Bubsy game probably turned out a lot... No, the new Bubsy game did turn out a lot better than Shaq Fu, because it made reference to the fact that it was Bubsy. It both got the joke about being a new Bubsy game, while simultaneously, understanding what Bubsy is, even cracking jokes about old, terrible game mechanics, like the fall damage in the old Bubsy games. And it's like, good. This means that, you understand the source material. Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn doesn't even reference Shaq Fu. And yes, that will annoy me. I'm a freaking game collector and historian, okay? Of course that aspect is going to annoy me. But yeah, no, I think everything that's been kickstarted has been a disappointment to some degree. But I think Bubsy turned out a lot better than Shaq Fu did. For whatever that is worth. Anyway, time for yet another break. So here is Ice Tray by Quality Control featuring Quavo and Lil Yachty. Here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. And stay tuned for the last segment of GameBabble Live. Please enjoy and thank you. That was Strip That Down by Liam Payne featuring Quavo, here on 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. Welcome back to GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Tuesday from noon to 3 p.m. So we're coming up on the last segment of the show, and I do believe it is time to talk a little bit about Fighting EX Layer. I did pick it up. I did enjoy it. And wow, what a conundrum. So to anyone who's just joining us in the Fighting EX Layer saga, many moons ago, one of the people who created Street Fighter II left Capcom to form his own company, Arika. And they actually worked with Capcom to make Street Fighter EX, which was a 3D Street Fighter game. Of sorts, it really just used polygonal graphics, which was what everyone wanted at the time. Polygons were the hot new thing. Street Fighter was still very hot, so people were like, man, when's Street Fighter going to be 3D? So Arika made Street Fighter EX, which featured a blend of classic Street Fighter characters and new characters that they had created. And everyone hated it. Well, not really hated it, but they were very unimpressed. Even at the time, the visuals were considered unimpressive, and people they didn't really dig the gameplay. Street Fighter EX2 came out as a very late PS1 release, and most people didn't even care about it. Street Fighter EX3 was probably one of the most well-received. It was practically a PS2 launch title, certainly first gen. And for the first year or two, people loved it because, hey, here's Street Fighter, but with fancy new PlayStation 2 graphics. Those graphics quickly became dated, and EX3 quickly became known as the worst entry of the series. But as Street Fighter eventually started to get polygonal, people started to go, oh geez, I hope it's not as bad as Street Fighter EX. And it was around that time that some people started saying, hey, you know what? Street Fighter EX plus Alpha on the PS1 is actually good. It's the good one. Because the first game was very, very basic. It was just, let's make a Street Fighter that plays like Street Fighter, but has polygons. And they succeeded at that. It was perfectly fine. As time has gone on, though, people have begun to respect the series a bit more, and Street Fighter EX2 is actually starting to get a lot of play. A lot of people are really starting to enjoy the game. There have been, tournaments for the old fighter, and the price of the PS1 release has been going up, so I'm glad I got mine when I did. So, people are starting to like the EX series. EX3 is still known as the bad one. But I'm going to tell you a little secret. EX3 came out, less than a year after EX2. I think it was rushed, and honestly, EX3 still plays fine, but the graphics actually look more dated than EX2's. It's weird. Because EX2 had a more cartoony visual style because it was on PS1. Since they moved to PS2, they tried to make the graphics more detailed, and technically they're more detailed, but it wound up looking more ugly because of it. But the thing with EX3 was that it was a throw things at the wall, see what sticks kind of game. It actually has 4-player simultaneous fights, and 2-on-2 tag matches with team-up attacks. And I don't think they actually had time to actually test or balance any of this, so I'm sure they're completely broken. But that's part of what makes EX3 really fun. It still has the tight responsive controls of the previous EX games and all the same features. I just bet that it has some kind of technical issues and bugs, probably some goofy infinites. I don't know. I'm sure it's got problems, but playing it casually, it's crazy fun. In fact, I would say EX3 is the most fun single-player EX game. Just, the single-player mode is wacky. You start by fighting 3 people simultaneously, and the last one you beat asks to join your party, and then you do a 2-on-2 tag match with the other character, and you can do 2-player co-op, and it's weird. EX3 has a very weird arcade mode, but it was super fun. Anyway, since then, Arika's been doing, Tetris games, and some Cardcaptor Sakura games. They made a music puzzle game called Technic Beat. They haven't really been doing a whole lot. And back on 3DS, they actually tried to make a new Street Fighter EX style game, and no one really, bit. So, last year, for April Fool's Day, they released a trailer for a mysterious unnamed fighting game that featured characters from Street Fighter EX. Hokuto, Garuda, and Kairi were all there. And people were like, wow, these characters, they were like, wow, this actually looks really fun. And they showed it on April Fool's Day, and then they said, ha, April Fools, the game isn't real. Now here's an hours upon hours long stream of us playing this game that isn't real, and everyone got really confused. They're like, what? They're like, yes, this is an April Fool's joke. We are now going to spend 5 hours streaming this game that totally isn't real. And so we're all sitting there like, what? Well, apparently it was all part of a scheme, because they really, really wanted to make a new Street Fighter EX game, but without the Street Fighter characters. And so their plan was to release this, show the game off on April Fool's Day when everyone's doing goofy April Fool's thing and people are paying attention, reporting on the goofy April Fool's things that are going on. And so when people see this game and then they're told, oh, it's an April Fool's joke, and then they see that it's being streamed, but they can't have it, they'll go, oh, I want to play that game. It looks really fun. And it did garner enough interest that it began development. And for the past year, they've been working on the game, and it finally came out last week, eventually gaining the moniker Fighting EX Layer. And it is, which that's a long story in and of itself. But anyway, the game finally launched, and it has a little bit of a problem. Namely, it is ludicrously overpriced and has almost no single-player content. And some people have looked at it and said, well, that's perfectly fine. No, it isn't. At this point, I have to say, we are very, very lucky that the fighting game community has latched on to this game. Because you see, my favorite fighter of this generation and last generation might actually be my second favorite fighter of all time, is maybe third. But anyway, one of my favorite fighters of all time is this game called Chaos Code. And it came out on PS4 with online play at half the price of Fighting EX Layer, with way more content. And it came out and no one played it. I went online, barely anyone was there. There were no people really playing Chaos Code, despite the fact that it is a really, really, really good fighter. Because, it didn't get a heavy push, not a lot of people paid attention to it. But that was fine, because Chaos Code has single player. It has an arcade mode with 2 different endings per character, and custom colors, and a challenge mode, and a survival mode, and a time attack mode. It has stuff to do other than play online. So it's fine. Fighting EX Layer has no arcade mode. Doesn't even have a versus computer mode. The only thing you can do offline is you go into training mode and you set the computer to Kumite, and then it turns into a secret survival mode that takes place on the training stage. And that's okay. Survival mode would be fine, but training stage only. Training music only. And that's it. And people have gone, well, they don't have enough money to make an arcade mode. BS! You got the AI programmed. You got the characters. You got the stages. All you need to do is put together 8 random computer matches, and then when you beat them, you get a wall of text. They've got the walls of text. They actually have plot for this game that they keep posting online about why Hokuto is now Shirase, and why Nanase is now Sanane, and there's all this stupid BS. They've written the plot. They just aren't putting it in the game. We would be fine with 8 fights, wall of text, freaking anything to do if there was no online. Thankfully, the fighting game community has been so excited about this game that, as of right now, you can actually find matches relatively easily, and the netcode is good. And thankfully, admittedly, this is one feature it has that Chaos Code doesn't. You can search for matches while doing other things. So you can sit there in training mode searching for matches. You could be doing the Kumite mode while waiting for matches. And that helps. But yes, the game is preposterously bare bones, and there is no way to single player visit and enjoy all the different stages. Now, that could be patched in later, but the fact that they launched it without even a versus CPU mode where I could pick stages, kind of disappointing. Yet on the flip side, netcode's good. Controls tight and responsive. Gameplay fast-paced and fun. And the visuals, the graphics, this is what blows my mind. This game looks gorgeous. Not like Tekken 7 good, not DOA 6 good, but really good. It looks better than any of the fighters Capcom has put out. Looks way better than Street Fighter V. Looks way better than Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and that's the one I want to focus on. This game spent barely over a year in development, and it has a similar visual style to Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Everyone gives Marvel vs. Infinite, like, they always say, oh, it's Marvel's fault because they demanded a realistic visual style, and so the Capcom characters all look bad. BS! Fighting EX Layer is also anime characters in a realistic visual style, and it looks fantastic. It is literally the way Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite should have looked. And the fact that big old Capcom, who actually has money, makes a game that looks so bad, and then Arika makes this? Okay, real talk. If Arika goes out of business after this, Capcom needs to buy them, / rehire them. At least their modeling person. Capcom desperately needs whoever is doing the character models for Fighting EX Layer. Like, more than anything else ever. Like, Capcom, make a Kickstarter. I'll pay their salary so you can stop sucking at this. That's what I'm talking about here. The characters, they're so good. Game looks great. Plays great. It is a good fighter that is just missing basic content and is overpriced. And the overprice goes beyond that because, well, Arika is apparently down to maybe about 15 employees now. Pretty much, if this game doesn't succeed, they go out of business. this is their last hurrah. That's what everyone's been saying. And that's why it does stupid things like you only get 2 character colors and you have to pay more money to get the character color pack, which contains everything except the silver and gold colors, which cost, like, big money. Also, you can buy new Gogi decks, and those cost a couple. They are selling a lot of DLC for this game, even though it costs a pretty hefty chunk of money and is lacking basic features, because they need to make money off this game. Like I said, I bought it because I'm still banking on Pullumperna and Area showing up. And thankfully, both Volcano Rosso and Pullumperna have their character models done. They have begun development of these characters. It's just a question of if they can slap some animations on them and get them on the PSN store before they go out of business so I can throw more money at them for Pullumperna. And I hope that happens, because I like that character. I hope that they put in, a basic arcade mode. Spend a couple minutes putting one of those together. 8 fights, wall attacks, please. It's all I want. All anyone wants. Just basic things. But yeah, Fighting EX Layer is just, it's such a weird situation. If the fighting game community hadn't kind of come together to support this game, at least for now. Oh. It's that time again. I wonder if you can hear me. You probably can't. You shouldn't be able to, because this is supposed to be taking that over. Oh, good. That sounds great. That sounds phenomenal. Fantastic. Let's get this microphone away from that. And to you, too. Good to know. Well, thank you, RoboVoice. Everyone's ears okay? I don't know if I was audible during that or not. I shouldn't be. I might have been. Apparently, I'm audible over the internet, but not over the actual radio. That surprised me. Surprise! Emergency alert test. Sorry about that. Didn't see it coming. So, what was I talking about? Fighting EX. Anyway, it is practically a miracle that for now the fighting game community has all come together to support this game that should be flopping right now. And I'm glad they are, because it is a really good fighting game. From a personal standpoint, yes, I like Chaos Code more. But Fighting EX Layer is a really good fighting game. It's super fun. And I hope it gets the support necessary to keep going for a while and eventually grow into a proper fighting game and then get a real boxed release. Apparently, there are boxed releases, but they've only made 1,000 of them because the company has no money. They are literally for people who have worked on the game and people who win tournaments. They said they're for conventions and stuff. They'll give you a boxed copy of Fighting EX Layer. So, very much collector's items. At least this version of it. I'm hoping that maybe they'll do a real boxed release later on once they put content in the game. But that's the worst part. There's a part of me that wants to go out and get Fighting EX Layer. It's a great game. But it's overpriced and has no content. And that's how literally everyone in the fighting game community feels. Like, I know that's like Maximilian's review of the game. This is a phenomenal game. I love it. It has no content and costs way too much money. And I'm sorry, no, you can't make excuses for this. I know they have no money. I know Arika is a small-time developer. Still should have had an arcade mode. Still should have had something. The fact that you cannot go to a stage other than the training stage in single player, little bit of a problem. Lot of bit of a problem. At that price point. This game should have been a lot cheaper if they were going to pull that. Honestly, I wish they would have done the Killer Instinct thing. You know, release the game for free or for a very, very, very low price and then sell all the characters as DLC. Actually, no, free. It would have to be free. I wish they would release the game free with one character, maybe two, and then you have to pay money for all the other characters, which would have, raised the price of the full game, but at the same time, I think they would have made a lot more money off of it, because giving away a free fighting game, giving away a free game in general, tends to generate a decent chunk of money. A lot of people will play a game just because it's free. I watched Dead or Alive 5 happen, and when it went free to play, it really benefited the game, and they made a lot of money off of people who, rather than just going out and buying the full game, would buy each individual character and then costumes for all the characters over a very, very long period of time. I think it could have really worked out for Eureka. But it is what it is. We'll see what happens with Fighting EX Layer. Good game, no content, too much money. That is the tale of that game. Anyway, that wraps up today's episode of GameBabble Live. Tune in next week, wherein we'll find something else to talk about, because who knows what the following week will bring us. Until then, I hope you have enjoyed the show. Hope you tune in next week. And coming up next is Neutron Dawn by Proletariat Punch, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening, and please join